News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker.
And I'm Karen Moscow.
And Karen, let's begin with new developments in the Middle East. Israel is resuming a truce with Hamas in Gaza after fighting over the weekend, each side accusing the other of breaching a deal brokered by President Trump. Now, let's get more from Paul Wallace. He's Bloomberg's managing editor covering the Middle East.
For now, it seems as if the answer is yes, it is still intact, messy as it is. Late last night, the Israeli military essentially said that it had resumed a ceasefire on its part. The U.S., including J.D. Vance, the vice president, and Donald Trump himself, have been saying over the weekend that these types of incidents that we saw in the last 2 days, deadly clashes, were pretty much expected, and that this ceasefire was always going to be pretty fragile and messy in the first few days or even weeks.
And Bloomberg's Paul Wallace says the transfer of humanitarian aid into Gaza, that has resumed. It had been halted after Hamas militants killed 2 Israeli soldiers, which prompted Israel to launch a wave of strikes across Gaza.
Well, John, we turn now to the latest on trade, and President Trump said the U.S. will, quote, be fine with China, just days before the two sides return to the negotiating table. The president spoke to reporters aboard Air Force One.
One of the things I want is China's going to buy soybeans. I want China to stop with the fentanyl. Very, normal things. I don't want them to play the rare earth game with us.
And the U.S. and China hold talks later this week in Malaysia with a trade truce set to expire November 10th. Months of stability have been upended in recent weeks after Washington brought in some tech restrictions and proposed levies on Chinese ships entering U.S. ports. China responded with parallel moves and outlined tighter export controls on rare earths and other critical minerals.
And Karen, as investors wait for those talks, we are getting fresh data out of China this morning. China's shipments of rare earth magnets to the U.S. and the European Union, they dropped in September. Still, the country says the economy is still on track to reach this year's expansion target despite the weaker growth. Gross domestic product expanded 4.8%, slightly exceeding economists' forecast.
Well, back here in the U.S., John, we have some big tech issues that are popping up this morning. Amazon Web Services says it suffered a widespread disruption that's affecting services on many platforms. The outage from the world's largest cloud provider is degrading services from several companies, including artificial intelligence company Perplexity and the Coinbase and Robinhood financial platforms. Amazon accounts for about a third of the cloud market, meaning any outage has major wide-reaching effects. And when contacted by Bloomberg, the company said it was still investigating the outage, and it didn't comment further.
And overnight in Asia, Japan's Nikkei closed at an all-time high as the new ruling Liberal Democratic Party looks set to finalize a new coalition. And that's fueling hopes that the pro-stimulus leader, Sonia Takaichi, will become the country's first female prime minister. Let's get more from Bloomberg's Alistair Gale in Tokyo.
He looks set to win a vote, which we expect to happen in Parliament tomorrow, to become the prime minister, and then she can get on with the business of running the country and trying to push through her economic ideas in terms of giving Japan new momentum, both economically and diplomatically.
And Bloomberg's Alistair Gale says Takaichi is touting plans to inject more spending into strategic industries like defense, technology, cybersecurity, and nuclear energy.
Well, in Europe, John, French bonds are dropping after S&P Global Ratings downgraded its sovereign credit score. It's an unscheduled move that highlights France's fiscal problems and places its debt at risk of forced selling by some funds. S&P Global downgraded the country to A+ from AA-, saying the nation's budget uncertainty was elevated.
And back here in the U.S., the federal government remains closed, marking the third longest shutdown in U.S. history. The Senate reconvenes and votes later today, and if the vote fails, the shutdown will extend into its third week. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries telling ABC there remains no bipartisan dialogue in the lower chamber.
We haven't heard anything from Donald Trump or the Republicans over the last few weeks. They have gone radio silent.
And that's the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. He says Democrats are steadfast in wanting to extend Affordable Care Act subsidies. And their position was echoed at the more than 2,600 No Kings protests that took place across the country this weekend. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson responded to the demonstrations on ABC's This Week.
They needed a stunt. They needed a show. If President Trump was a king, the government would be open right now.
Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson says he will address health care subsidies only after the government reopens.
And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg.